right now to our membership director. And for those of you that have not yet met Amir Rizvani, it's great pleasure for us tonight to have Amir hosting our chat with a really interesting subject and a great speaker. So over to you, Amir.
Thank you, Peggy. Welcome, everybody. Before I have the pleasure of introducing Charles, I'd like to go over just two quick housekeeping tips today. One, to please keep yourself on mute throughout the presentation. And if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box below, and we're going to get to them in chronological order at the end and have you be able to have that discussion with Charles and get those questions answered. So I'd like to introduce Charles Bernard. He's the founder and CEO of Criteria for Success. It's a sales growth and management consulting company, and that's located in Manhattan. Charles is an accomplished speaker that has trained thousands of CEOs, sales managers, and salespeople on the art of business relationships, growing revenue, overcoming challenges, and he has over 20 years of experience in direct sales, sales management, recruiting, training. Charles is a subject matter expert, and he has a knack for troubleshooting. Charles resides in New York City, and hence that's why the title of today's chat is called Lessons from the Epicenter. We all know how bad it was over in New York. And he's also authoring a debut book called Enabling Buying in a World of Selling. We are very happy to have him with us today. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Charles.
Thank you, Peggy, and thank you, Amir, for that very introduction. It's an honor to be here. We also have a couple of housekeeping things just real fast. First is just want to confirm my time because I don't want to get off track and then realize that we don't have time for Q&A. So can we confirm what time we'd like to end today?
Great question, Charles. We schedule this event until 5:30. So typically, our speakers will maybe spend 30 to 45 minutes presenting and then open it up for the Q&A. I hope that will work for you. Okay.
That works fine. Thank you. And I also would like to introduce someone else who's on my team, or let her introduce herself. Her name is Laura Marchoff. And Laura, do you want to say a quick hello and what you do at Criteria for Success?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I am the Sales and Marketing Coordinator for Criteria for Success, and I will be sharing some resources relevant to the conversation we're having today in the chat box. If you missed them, don't worry. I'm going to send them to Nancy and Amir after this, so you'll get them.
So I thought it would be helpful. Thank you, Laura. I thought it'd be helpful to share a PowerPoint, just a way to stay focused and on track. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about sales and business development. That's really the topic today. And whether you're in sales or you're associated with sales, or frankly, you're not in sales at all, I hope this will be relevant because probably midway through my presentation, I'm going to make some comments about what I consider the role of a salesperson to be, and that might dispel a lot of myth about what you should do when you're in a sales position. But today we're going to talk about driving business development and organization stability post-COVID-19. So big thank you for your time today and for that kind introduction. This is something you might want to get your smartphone and just snap a picture of this screen. What Laura did for you, for all of us, is create a landing page, go.criteriaforsuccess.com/Innovators Alliance, which is specific to this talk. And when you go to this landing page, you'll get a copy of the slides, and then you'll get some other goodies that will accompany the talk. And those goodies are typically ebooks, podcast references, webinars, other resources that will enhance the talk. So if you want to do a little bit of a deep dive, you can do that. So who we are is an organization that does sales training, management consulting. We develop sales playbooks, which I will talk about today. And our goal is to enable discovery, breakthroughs, and accelerate long-term sales success. And we work with companies of all shapes, sizes, industries, locations, and we've been doing this since 2004. Our mission is to enable buying in a world of selling. And as Peggy had mentioned, or actually Amir had mentioned, I am writing a book on this topic. I'm very passionate about it. And I think a lot of the traditional selling today actually inhibits buying, actually gets in the way of buying. So today I want to show you some tools that you can take away and take to your organization. My goal is to make this relevant so that you can actually apply a lot of these approaches to help you develop business in your own businesses. The common problems we see, there's more, but I'm going to put down the top 5, but particularly related to COVID-19 is number 1, organizations, sales teams, whether you're a sales team of 1 or 1,000, doesn't matter. There's no real sales process, no playbook. The second is salespeople, particularly now during COVID-19, are trying to adapt an old method of selling to this current paradigm, and they're having some problems doing that. It's difficult to keep buyers engaged at the moment. People are very distracted. People are running around trying to keep their businesses together in many cases. And so keeping buyers engaged quickly, especially if you want to have a sales conversation, is a big problem for salespeople. Inconsistent learning and training. You've got some top performers. You've got some not so top performers. There's some training that's a kind of smattering here and there, but there isn't a lot of consistency. And so that's another big problem that we see. And so I just want to make sure that that resonates. And then the last thing is that you and I can spend a lot of time chit-chatting and giving people screens and saying nice things. And for whatever reason, prospects aren't seeing the value. They don't really see the value as an investment. All they see is, oh my God, that's a lot of money. That's a budget. That's a cost. I don't know if I can afford it. And so I want to kind of change that thinking into less around paying for something and more around investing for something. So those are the top 5 concerns that we're hearing, having spoken to a lot of CEOs and salespeople and business owners like yourselves in these few months that we've been in lockdown in particular. So common organizational problems, so those are kind of sales, is that the selling team or the selling function isn't aligned with marketing, operations, finance, HR, with the rest of the organization. Kind of sales is on its own as an island. Companies aren't improving all functions at once. What we mean by that is that traditionally, when an organization is looking to grow, they'll take time to build their sales process, then they'll take time to build their operations process. And this quarter, we're going to focus on hiring, and this quarter, we're going to focus on training. The issue that we're seeing now is that because of the dramatic impact to everybody's business over the last few months, organizations don't have the luxury of that kind of sequential initiative thinking, and they have to do it all at once. They have to kind of like, my God, we got to get out of this situation. We got to get back to work. We got to grow quickly. We got to get stable. And so that's a big problem for companies, not being able to do that all at once. We think that we need to have a growth team, and we'll talk about that. So there is no growth team. We're kind of relying on individuals to kind of piece together strategy. And rather than do that, we think it's more important to put together a team, like a steering committee, if you will. Another problem is that there's no cross-functional or poor cross-functional collaboration. Collaboration is a big word for us in terms of growing an organization's sales. And lastly, kind of a no-brainer is a big problem is ineffective or lack of leadership. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, how do I adapt my leadership style? How do I lead us out of this unique situations. So these are, again, the top 5 organizational problems that we're seeing. When we say assemble a growth team, this is what we mean. Focus on plan and forecasts and sales and delivery. Learn to navigate a fragmented environment, which might be physical as well as virtual. So a lot of businesses might go back to their offices, but what we're seeing is a fragmented environment where some of the team is working remotely, some of the team is working physically together. And I actually have a client who runs a business, and they've divided their employees into a blue team and a red team. And the blue team come in certain days of the week, and the red team come in certain other days of the week because they want a social distance in the office, and they don't want to be on top of each other. We talk about a sales playbook. We talk about areas of success. So generally speaking, when we work with companies who want us to come in and give them advice, we usually find relative to having a sales process or relative to having a sales playbook, they usually fit into one of 3 categories. They either have no process at all, which is pretty rare, but it does happen. The second category is they have bits and pieces of a process. Some of it is in people's heads. Some of it is in a computer hard drive. Some of it is on a Word document someplace. So we kind of take stabs and fits and bursts in developing a sales process. And I would argue that that's the majority of the people that we come across. And then the third category is we have a very comprehensive process. We have a sales process that we built, and we'd really like to kind of improve it. And so we come in and we'll do an assessment. Regardless of where you are, no process, some process, robust process, we believe, because we've been doing this exclusively, this is all we do, we've been focused on since 2004 and worked with thousands of companies, that at the end of the day, your sales process needs to fit these 5 areas. And we consider to be the 5 best practice areas. And I'm going to walk you through, and I'm warning you in advance, there's a lot of data here. And again, when I do this in person, I laugh because a lot of people come up with their cameras and smartphones and take pictures, which you're welcome to do. But again, don't forget, we'll give you the slides. So I'm going to go through each of those 5 areas, and I'm going to just say up front that we believe they're pretty bulletproof. They stand up against all flexibility in your organization, different situations. So the first area is prospecting. You got to have a section in your playbook, in your process, to generate leads. And so we've identified a series of best practices. And you're welcome to take this slide and use it as a template. So if you do, like I said, have pieces of a process, you might say, oh, wow, phone scripts, we don't have that. Maybe we should develop that. So this is kind of a little bit of a structure so that you could kind of orient your process. So first area is prospecting, generate leads. Second area is to take those leads and sell them or convert them into opportunities, and we call that selling. So in here you'll see a number of different best practices that help you convert leads to opportunities and then work through qualification, value proposition, how do you run a meeting, virtual or in person, success stories, going for no, follow-ups. We're actually going to cover some of those today. The third area we almost never see, and that is critical, we think, to having your sales process, which is the support section. The support section, think of it as an area where you've defined how the rest of the organization supports selling, because selling is very embedded in an organization and it's not an island. And so if you sell something here, you're going to have to deliver it here. In other words, I sell something, it impacts operations. If I have overcapacity, I need to sell more. If I have undercapacity, if I have overcapacity, that's something that we need to catch up on. If I have undercapacity, we also need to sell more to fill that. or generate that capacity, or we need to generate more capacity on the operations side. So the typical support areas are sales management, because obviously you want a leader to support the sales team or sales function. Marketing is a big part. Operations, hiring, which is human resources and onboarding, and what we call a toolbox, which actually gives people the tools that they need to successfully develop business. The fourth area we think is also very important, and that is an area we call system. And system would be, think of all the systems you have that drive selling behaviors. The number one generally is a CRM system. So a common name in the CRM world is Salesforce.com. Probably heard of it. There's another one called Microsoft Dynamics, and then there's various other ones, Zoho, and a few other CRM systems that are out there. And again, we see without a process, a lot of the time these systems get brought into an organization, they don't get adopted. They get brought into an organization and they're being underutilized. So we think it's important to have a playbook that defines the best practices to get the most out of your CRM system. And then lastly, my favorite, which is oftentimes the hardest to describe, is an area for the team to share what is, oh, I'm missing a C in success. Okay. So a team section in the playbook that defines common best practices. So I want to make sure that I leave this up here for a minute, because this may also generate some Q&A later on. If you want to kind of write down some thoughts or some questions that you'd like me to come back to, I'd be very happy to respond to those as well. So I'm going to leave that here for a second, and then I'm going to talk around this. But as you can see, there's a lot of detail here. And again, by way of a template, this might help you develop your own sales process or enhance the one that you have. So there's about 40 best practices here. I'm going to pause and let you just look at that, and then maybe write down a question or two that you want me to answer later on when we get to the Q&A. So I'm going to pick it back up by saying two more things, and then we'll move on. We think it's really important to, when you develop a sales process, or in this case, a sales playbook, to form a sales growth team. You might find, or you might think logically that, oh, we're going to develop a sales process, let's give it to the head of sales. That's a mistake, we believe. Why? Because if you have a sales team and you have a VP of sales or a sales leader, generally speaking, that person is not a process person. That person is generally a people person. And so we want the VP of sales or the head of sales to focus on developing salespeople. We want the head of sales to develop an approach that people can use. And so when we talk about hiring a VP of sales, because oftentimes we hear, oh, no, let's not develop a sales playbook until we get a VP of sales. That's the same mistake, because we think it's important to hire a VP of sales into a process. So it sounds like this on an interview. You could say something like, this is our sales process. You're welcome to make adjustments, but you're coming into a process. And we've thought ahead of time what some of those best practices are. And so therefore, we don't want you reinventing the wheel and spending a lot of time developing a robust process, because frankly, a lot of the time, people don't have time to do that. So how do you develop the playbook? What we suggest instead is that you form a sales growth team that is representing 6 functions. We've just found this to be a best practice over years of doing this. So the 6 functions on a sales growth team, and you don't have to have one-to-one. In other words, one person could assume 2 functions. You don't have to have one person per function. But the 6 functions are sales, marketing, human resources, operations, finance, and executive leadership. Some of the not so obvious the questions we ask is, why finance? Well, finance, because A lot of the time, finance is involved in pricing, what salespeople are selling. Finance is involved in compensation plans, bonuses, spiffs. So finance generally has some input into putting a sales process together. And so we think that when we bring these, and HR would help develop salespeople, hire salespeople. And so sometimes VPs of sales get threatened because they think that they're being second guessed. And we think it's important that we actually reset that thinking, and it's actually the rest of the organization working collaboratively with the head of sales to not second guess them, but to actually support them, enhance them, etc. So that's the first thing. And we would recommend, for example, that the sales growth team meets monthly. So you get together in a conference room or in a virtual call, and you're essentially reviewing and adjusting the best practices, which gets me to my second point. When you're creating a sales playbook, I would highly recommend you do it in a system that allows for adaptability. And so the recommendation we make is to put the sales process or the sales playbook online in the cloud on a wiki platform like Wikipedia. You don't want to put it in a Word document because then you've got to change that content and it's not easy. And by having a wiki cloud site like Wikipedia that everyone can sign into, you can now allow people to change, edit, and adapt the sales playbook. So if I'm a salesperson and I'm looking at how to introduce the company in 30 seconds, and I came up with a new idea or a new version of doing that, I might put that in the playbook that's available for everybody to see. In the team section, I might want to share a success story about how I closed a piece of business or how a colleague helped me by providing me some input in a presentation. And so again, this is really a very fluid system, and therefore wiki technology is built purposefully for you to do that. We use a tool called editme.com, editme.com, but there's many other tools out there. Google has a wiki. I think Microsoft has Teams. There's a few others. We just happen to like this particular one because it's very easy, flexible, and robust. So those are just some ideas in terms of putting together a playbook that enhances people's performance, particularly if they're working remotely, like a lot of people are today. So the next slide I want to talk about is something I'm going to make an assumption applies to everyone on this Zoom. And that is that we are all practicing a consultative sell. Now, we define a consultative sell as a sale where you're problem solving. Now, that would be a typical B2B sale. And there are a lot of models out there you can imagine, like B2C, where people are like, I don't want to practice consultative selling. I don't want to solve problems. I don't want headaches. I just want scale, transactions, here's the price, here are the terms, here are the conditions, buy it. You have a problem, I'll show you how to return it or how to deal with it. And so that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about assuming that you're in some form of service business where you're problem solving. So to practice consultative selling, we believe there are 4 key behaviors. Number 1 is you want to ask good questions. Number 2, you want those questions to align to uncovering problems. Number 3, you want to share solutions. And number 4, you want to tell stories. And by and large, people buy into this. They go, yep, that sounds right. And then we ask this question, and we usually get no response. And the question we ask is, have you, as an organization, developed 20 best questions to ask? Have you developed a list of 20 common problems you solve? Have you developed a list of 20 solutions to those problems? And do you have a library of success stories that can prove how you implemented those solutions? And usually the response we get is no. And my immediate question is, why not? if those are the 4 best practice behaviors, the last thing on earth you want to have happen is be in a meeting and look up at the sky and say, God, please give me a good question to ask right now. I've run out of questions. I can't think of one. So by having a list of questions, you're never at a loss of what might be a good question to forward the conversation at any particular moment in time. So that's just something that we think is a valuable practice. So I want to show you a tool that puts that together, and I want to show you that it actually generates a lot of knowledge transfer in your organization. And the tool we give it a name, we call it a problem opportunity matrix. And I want to walk through an example for you. The way you develop this problem opportunity matrix is you start with a feature, because that's what you know. So you know what it is that you provide. So I'm going to give you an example. Our feature is a CFS sales playbook. And we say CFS sales playbook because it sounds unique. We could have said sales playbook, and then you might have asked me, do you have competitors? And I'd say, yes, we do. And then you'd say, well, can't everybody else say they have a sales playbook? And then we say, yeah. So by putting CFS, our company name or our company initials in front of it, it makes it unique. And that makes the prospect kind of go, I've heard of a sales playbook, but not a CFS sales playbook. What is that? So the way we want to describe it is we want to identify a benefit. What does the CFS playbook provide? So for each feature, you want to have a benefit. In this case, it provides a consistent sales process. Now, I will tell you, once you've isolated a feature and a benefit, the rest of this table moves very, very quickly, like a waterfall down, droplets coming down very quickly. So the problem, it's easy because it's always the opposite of the benefit. So if the benefit is it provides a consistent sales process, the problem is no consistent selling and no playbook. The question is always, please describe or tell me about, because that's phrased as an open question, followed by the problem. So in this case, it would be, please tell me about inconsistent selling, not having a playbook. And if someone says, wow, that is a problem, we don't have consistent selling, we don't have a sales playbook, I'd say, great, tell me more. And they'd be like, well, we tried it, we put it together, it didn't work. We hired a consultant, they charged us a lot of money, we didn't quite get the results. And I'm making notes because I know I want to come back to this when it's my turn to present. Now, I could present the details about the CFS sales playbook, or I could do something that I think is more valuable, and that is to tell a story. And people get a little crazy when we ask people to tell stories. They say, I'm not a good storyteller, I don't know how to tell stories. And we say, you don't have to worry about that because it's easy to tell a story if you follow these 3 points. Number 1, what was the problem? So in this case, provides a consistent, so the problem was no consistent selling. Number 2, what was the solution? We implemented the sales playbook. Number 3, what's the tangible benefit? So I'm going to role play it for you, and I'd just be curious if you could listen to me, and then I'm going to ask you a question. So please listen while I do a quick role play. So I'm going to say, great, tell me about inconsistent selling, not having a playbook. And the person's like, oh my God, it's a real problem, and we're chit-chatting, and he's telling me about his problem, and I'm making notes, and then he says, so what do you guys do? And I say, well, actually, before I tell you about the playbook, I want to tell you a quick story. We have a client just like you who's in the same business, and they had the problem of not having consistent selling. We came in, we implemented the CFS sales playbook, and we saw an uptick. We saw them generate an additional 30% in sales the following year. Now, here comes the question. If you were listening to the story, what does everyone on this Zoom call remember? So it's not a trick question. What do you remember about the story? You probably heard a lot of talking, but I'm going to bet you remember one thing out of my story.
30% increase.
30% increase. I was just about to say, this is a very shy group, doesn't like to talk. And then I realized you're all on mute. Sorry about that. Yeah, 30% increase. So here's what you're going to find. You're going to discover, if you practice this, that most people, when you tell them a story, they kind of tune you out. They're like, oh, here it comes, the sales pitch, here comes the big story. And then they hear 30%, and all of a sudden they wake up. They'll probably go something like this. 30%? What was that again? Back up. 30%. So what I want you to think about is every story you tell should have a number in it. So I know people go, wow, I can't put a tangible number. Yes, you can, and I'm going to give you a way to do that. Because people are hardwired for numbers. People will wake up when they hear that number because that's a proof point. Now, obviously, you don't want to lie. You want to say something that's valuable. But what about if you can't put a number on it? Like some of you might say, I can't demonstrate a number that demonstrates how I increase sales. So here's an alternative where you can use a number. Try this. 75% of our clients have reported a significant increase in business. 50% of our clients have come back and given us positive feedback. So all I need you to do is put a number on an intangible, because people will remember that number and they'll ask you to repeat the story. That's what we found over and over again. So imagine this is one row and I want you to do 20. And at a minimum, let's say, okay, you could push back and say, oh my God, 20 is a lot. Okay, let's do 10. And when you finish this, you'll have 10 features, 10 benefits, 10 problems, 10 questions, 10 stories. That's your library. And you'll probably discover that that's not operational, meaning you can't walk into a meeting with this like massive document that has all these columns and rows, and you're like, you're looking at it while you're talking to the person, and your prospect is going to say, what do you keep looking at? Like, why can't you pay attention to me, right? However, if you're on a Zoom call, you can have the screen up, you can be calling someone, and they may not see your screen, and now this is like a roadmap, this is a guide, right? Regardless, it's still a little cumbersome. So here's what I'd like you to consider that makes this tool operational. Take this column, the third column, which is all the problems, and let's say you have 10, or let's say you have a list of 20, you only want to pull out 5 for this call. Regardless, I want you to create another spreadsheet or another table that looks like this. Common problems we solve, followed by a list of problems. And then you'll have a YN column. So now that you've done that exercise, you can isolate a bunch of problems. And this would be a great thing for you to send in advance. You could email someone in advance and say, looking forward to our call on Tuesday, 10 a.m. in advance. I'm attaching a PDF. Would you be kind enough, or you could put it in the email if you want, would you be kind enough to take a look at this? Don't worry. When we get on the Zoom call, I'll pull it up, right? So you could do that, and then you pull this up. Now, I'd like you to consider how effective this tool is, because 5 minutes. Good morning, how you doing? Great, how's everything? Good, you still in lockdown? Yeah, when are you getting out of lockdown? I don't know, life sucks, whatever it is. 5 minutes, you're talking to somebody, and now you're getting down to business. If you didn't have this tool, you'd fall into the trap that a lot of salespeople fall into. They ask a lot of questions, they beat about the bush, there's a lot of kind of miscellaneous dead-end conversations. But if you put this up, you say, you know that thing I sent you in an email? It doesn't matter if you didn't send in an email. You could just say, I have a screen, I'd like to pull it up. Would you be kind enough to look at this list and just tell me if any of these jump out at you? Now, before I continue, I know some of your thought bubbles on this Zoom call, you might be thinking, what happens if there is a problem that they have that's not on the list? Okay, 1 in 1,000 times that'll happen. It doesn't matter, because they could say, none of my problems are on this list. Great. Would you be kind enough to tell me which problems you have that might relate to this, or at least this might be a jog your memory on some of the concerns you have, because you're putting people in a problem mindset. But I'm going to assert that if you're selling the same thing over and over and over again to the same people over and over and over again, you're going to know what the common problems are. And so I would say 10 is a good number. And if you've done a little research, you might know kind of who you're talking to. A VP of sales, well, I know a VP of sales is likely to have these 10 problems, or a VP of operations, they're probably likely to have a list of these 10 problems. And so by asking someone to consider which one of these they identify with, let's say they say number 1, number 2, and number 4. Great. So what has just happened to your meeting? And you can shove it in the, you can give me a response in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. But I want to ask you an open question. If someone does that in a meeting, what just happened to your meeting? You're certainly not going to be radio silent like you are right now. I can promise you that. You're not going to be like, I don't know, I have nothing. They just checked off, I have nothing, sorry. I'm not going to say anything. What usually happens is your meeting just got on track. Your meeting just got relevant, because now you know where you're going to focus your responses. You now know where you want to take the rest of the meeting. More importantly, they've set the agenda, which is always preferable. So think about the busyness of people today. Think about all the craziness that's going on. This to me is a moment of clarity where people can say, wow, here's my concern, here's my other concern, here's my other concern. And so what I want to leave you with is a process that you would engage in once people have responded. And the process is active listening. So when someone says no consistent selling, no playbook, and they identify that as their problem, the very first thing you're going to do is use a process called active listening, which is, please tell me more. What have you done? What have you not done? How does that impact you personally? And with each one of those, you're taking notes and allowing them to explain, because we don't think it's a good idea if someone says, no consistent selling, no playbook, that you jump in and say, well, we have a solution, let me describe that, because you're not really understanding how deep that problem is, how much of an impact it's having to their business. So active listening is a useful tool to enable you to get more information, so you can come back and tell a story, or you can talk about your solution. So this is just a tool that you could implement tomorrow. And I'm just going to go back to the, before we get to questions, I'm just going to go back to this screen and make one more claim, if I may. And that is that when you do this as a group, so please don't leave this webinar and run back to your offices and say, oh, okay, I'm going to put this together on my own. What we'd rather have you do is we'd rather have you do this as a group, in a group setting. So you do this with your team, bring in sales, bring in marketing, operations, human resources, finance, executives, and put this together, because the exercise of developing this problem opportunity matrix is what we call a knowledge transfer exercise. It actually enables you to speak about your business typically at a much deeper level than you normally would. I just want to leave that for you so that you can get that. We call this the knowledge transfer mechanism. And people ask us, so if I'm going to do 20 of these, how long does it take? And I'm going to tell you on average, get ready, don't fall off your chair, 8 hours. What? 8 hours. What do we mean? We mean 4 2-hour sessions, 2 4-hour sessions, and have someone who's good at facilitation walk people through this, because what you're going to find is you're going to keep honing and polishing this. So I'm very happy. I know we're getting into Q&A, But before we do that, I'm very happy if one of you wants to be brave enough and allow me to coach you, I'll help you develop this matrix so that it's an example that everybody else can use. So this might be an opportunity for you to unmute yourself if you're able to do that. And someone just step up and volunteer to do a row of the matrix so the rest of us can learn. I don't know if you were warned ahead of time by Amir that we would be doing an exercise, but we just think it's a good way to learn.
So would anybody like to volunteer?
Might be a time to voluntold somebody, Mayor. Come on, there's got to be somebody brave enough to do this.
I would say if you've had a couple of beers, now would be a really good time to get coached.
That would be you, Mark Nye.
Just remember to unmute yourself before you talk, or try talking.
We're not going to put anybody on the spot. They don't want to. It really would be a great experience. You know what? Maybe I will put somebody on the spot.
I promise you it won't be as painful as you think. We're pretty okay with this.
No, I just can't do it, Charles. They're all like, I can see them glaring at me through the screen, going, "Don't pick me."
Is that a Canadian thing, or is that
I
like?
guess.
Because I'm from England, and people are like, "Oh, we don't like to be put on the spot." And then when they volunteer, they like have a breakthrough.
Yes.
So
All right, Charles, let's do it.
Yes, Vern. Thank you for stepping up. Over to you.
you're an inspiration. So could I get your name again? I missed it.
I'm Vern Solomon.
Vern. Nice. Thank you so much, Vern. So what's your business? Now listen, I lost it. I'm trying to get rid of a panel. Hang on a second, Vern. I'll be right back with you. I'm trying to get rid of this chat panel that's right in the middle of my screen. Okay, we're good. All right. So please, as Vern and I are working together, I'm going to request that the rest of you start thinking about how this would apply to your own business. You're going to do a little bit of translating, but I promise you the process Vern and I are going to go through is exactly the same. So hang in with me, Vern. What is your business? What do you provide?
We build controlled environments. So anything that needs temperature, humidity, pressure, or cleanliness.
Beautiful, nice. And in this control environment, what is a feature? Let's assume you have a lot of features in what you provide. Name one. What's a feature?
Flexibility.
Flexibility, nice. Now, everybody else, please pay attention to what I'm doing with Vern, because this is how I would do it with everybody. Vern, do you have competitors?
Yes.
Could they say they have flexibility?
They say it, but they don't have it.
But they could say it, right?
They're saying it. I can blow holes in it, but they're saying it. When we started to say it, all of a sudden it came out in their literature.
We're not there yet. We're ready to blow holes, but we're not ready. So
Okay.
First thing I want you to consider is I want you to name that feature in a way that it sounds unique. Now, for the rest of you, because you'll be doing this exercise, hopefully, if you're like, I don't know, how do I make it unique? I don't know. The answer is stick your company name in front of it, and then it's unique. So what's your company name?
Environmental Systems. So we trademarked the wall system we use as Aluma One.
What do you call it? Limo One?
Aluma One. It's all aluminum. So ALUMA number one.
Beautiful. Is that flexibility or something else?
It's Sorry, I don't understand your question.
So I asked you for a feature and you said flexibility. Now, flexibility may sound like a benefit. So, but a Luma One sounds more like a feature. What is a Luma One? What is it?
It's a modular wall system. It's one of the things that we sell.
Let's go with the Luma One. So let's forget flexibility because that's going to take too much time. Let's go with the Luma One. It sounds unique. Okay. So your feature, if you were to fill this out, your feature is a Luma One. Now here's the question to Vern, but if we were doing this with everybody, same question. What's the benefit to a Luma One, to the buyer, to the client?
Okay, so that's the flexibility.
So it has what kind of flexibility?
The flexibility to make changes at any point in time, even after installation.
And why is that? Why is that a benefit?
Because the world always changes.
Okay, so easy to make changes. So let's get rid of flexibility and let's use some street smart language, you know, street, easy to understand. So a Luma One, easy to make changes all the time. Beautiful. What's the problem? And remember, the problem's always the opposite. So what's the problem?
Nobody actually ever understands exactly what they need to deliver, or even after they've delivered it, something's gonna change.
So let me coach you, if I may, Vern. Could I coach you? Because I've just been doing this for years. The problem, being the opposite, is unable to make changes easily. Because if easy to make changes is the benefit, the problem is you're unable to make changes. And you might stick the word easily in there. Unable to easily make changes. Sure, you can make changes, but you have to break down 5 walls. That's going to cost you a lot of money, and it's not easy. But in a Luma One, it's easy to make changes. So now watch, if we continue the exercise, the question would be the following, and I'll just help you because you've been kind enough to work with me and I've been putting you on the spot, so I'll just help you out. The question for you, and you might want to write this down, Vern, is tell me about where you're unable to easily make changes to your modular walls or whatever it is you're providing, right? And so we ask that question, tell me about where you're unable to make changes in conversation in our marketing literature, wherever you want to put it, so that people go, wow, you're speaking my language. You know that I have a problem there. And therefore, we don't have to do it right now, but I would ask you, Vern, do you know the story that you could tell? Do you have an example that you could give where you've done that and it worked out for somebody?
Yeah.
So think about the benefit. So think about, in your mind, this person, this company, where you put in a Luma One. What was the benefit? Can you remember? What did you do? Did you save them something? Did you make it easier for them?
We allowed them to increase revenue quickly.
By how much?
They were able to book another $3 million worth of business in 2 weeks because we were able to make changes to their system.
So everyone on this call is giving you a virtual clap because that's exactly what we want from you. I want you to remember this exercise, Vern. I want you to remember exactly what you said. 2 weeks, $3 million. That's what's going to stick. In 2 weeks, we saved $3 million. People would have gone unconscious until you said that, and then all of a sudden they're present. They're awake. They're, what? What? 2, 3 million? How'd you do that? So I just want everyone to do the exact same exercise. Now, how long did it take for Vern and me to do that exercise? I don't know if anyone was timing me, but that was about 5, 10 minutes. Imagine multiplying that by 20, and imagine doing that with a room full of people who are like, is that really the benefit? Is that really the feature? Is there a better way we could say the question? Imagine all that thinking. That's why it takes 8 hours. Because for Vern and me, and I know what I'm doing, I've been doing this a long time, took us 10 minutes, multiply that by 20. My promise to you and my gift to you, if you'll accept it, is that by completing this exercise, Vern can now isolate the problem, multiplied by 20. One of the problems is unable to make changes easily, unable to easily make changes. And then when someone sees that, they're like, wow, that's my problem. Tell me about that. So I just want you to see the amount of horsepower that gets generated when we do this exercise collaboratively. I hope that that resonated. And again, Vern, thank you for being brave. I'm a sales trainer, so you should know that I don't let people off the hook, and you did a really good job. So thank you so much. And so now what I'd like to do is give you time for Q&A. If you've been thinking about some Q&A, if you've been thinking about some things, feel free. I'll just go right to the end of the slide. So I'm all yours if you want to fire off some questions or feedback.
Hey, Charles, this is V. Wang here from I3 International. As you're working with these companies right now, and they're going through this COVID-19, post-COVID-19, and coming back on, what are some of the best practices that you're seeing these companies do to try to help bring up the sales, right? I mean, we're all on this call because we want to know how we can bring up our sales. Our issue is that the market is dictating this environment of uncertainty. And so our clients are not willing to spend the money. So whether we say our product's the best or it does this or it has the feature, our clients are not willing to depart with their capital. So with that being said, what are some of the things that your clients are doing to try to get through this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think if I was with you for a period of time, I think I need to reorient that thinking, because if you're making a statement like it's true that people aren't willing to part with their money, then game over. It's like I wouldn't even get up in the morning. I'd be like, might as well look for another job. I mean, no one's spending money. So some of the strategies, so the question is really, people will spend money, at least this has been my experience, if they see a return. People will invest money if they think or they can see that there is going to be a return or a benefit. So the question becomes, what helps you identify a return? And the very first thing that we've been asking our clients to do is go through the process I just mentioned, like here are the common problems, and people might identify with those, and then ask some very simple questions. One question that I think is really worth asking is, what sort of a return? I know you don't have money. I know you said that at the beginning, and I appreciate that. But let's put that aside and just talk about your business. So here's a role play. Ring, ring. Good morning. Charles Bernard from Criteria for Success. We do sales training. I was referred to you. Maybe there's a way to warm the call up. Okay, so the person hasn't hung up on me. They're still talking. And here's what I want you to consider. I don't want you to wait. You pitch, and you're going to get the response that you just told me you're expecting. And the response you're going to get is, we don't have any money. Nice, thanks for the training. Thanks for all that information. We don't have any money. So rather than wait for that, what I want you to do is proactively create a list of concerns up front that people are going to give you. And you know what they are. You just mentioned one. People don't have money. Okay, what else is a concern? Now's not the right time. Okay, what else is they don't have attention. They're busy doing other things, repairing their business. Okay, if you ask yourself proactively, and this is an exercise for all of us to do, I'd like you to create a list of immediate concerns that people are going to throw back at you ahead of time. So you're not chit-chatting, and then you're going to go, what do you think? And this is what they're going to say. We have no money. And then you're like, oh, God, I just wasted half an hour of my time. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to do the following. And it's counterintuitive, but we find it works a lot. Better than 50%. Ring, ring, good morning, how are you? You get into a relationship, and then you say the following. One of the concerns I hear, we've been telling our clients this, one of the concerns I hear is people don't have money. You may not have money. Can we put that aside and just talk about your business? And as people are talking about their business, you'll discover openings for you to have a conversation. And that might be a place for you to put, here's some of the common problems we're seeing. I know you have no money, but here's the common problems we're seeing. And I'm just curious, do any of these react? And then ask this question, and it's not a tricky question, it's a straightforward question. If you were to invest, use that language, if you were to invest now or later, because now may not be the time, but now or later, what sort of a return are you looking for? And they'll tell you if they're being cooperative. If they're being nasty and mean and just want to get you off the phone, doesn't matter what you say, they're just going to say something not cooperative. But if you've had good rapport and you've added value, you might want to say, what sort of a return are you looking, what would be valuable to you? Not now, but later. Then I want you to do one more thing. And I think this applies to everybody. I want you to summarize the conversation in an email. But I don't want you to send the kind of email that most people send, which is not going to get any attention. That's lots of paragraphs, thanks, great conversation. I want you to send an email that has 4 sections, and I want you to tell them this. Great, thank you, I really appreciate the dialogue. I'm going to send you an email within 24 hours of this conversation with 4 sections. What I think your goals are, what I'm going to need from you if you decide you want to do more business with us at some point, what I'm going to do, and how we can determine success. And the reason I want you to do that and send that out is that future time will come and that person will see that email in bullet form, numbered bullets, no paragraphs, nice and clean. Here are your 4 goals. Here are the 4 things I need from you. Here are the 4 things I'm going to give you. Here are 3 things that will measure result, a way for you to move forward, desired results. And then you just send that. And you, next time when you call them a month later, a week later, 3 months later, remember that email? I'll send it to you again. That pulls up the conversation we had. So all I'm asking you to consider is placeholders and not give up and just think, no one's buying, no one has money, why am I even bothering? Does that help?
I think, you know, I think in normal times that would help. I mean, being in this kind of role myself for the last 20 years, I think in normal times it would help. During a time like this, what I'm hearing is, you know, from my cohorts or people in the field that I've been talking to is you either have a product that is needed right now in the market, you're either into PPE, you're either into plexiglass making, but let's say you're selling, you know, vacations. You know, for you to kind of say, yeah, well, we'll follow up when 6 months from now, when vacation's on your mind, when people are able to travel again and you feel safe traveling, or when you have the money to travel. I'm really in the position for, and I can't speak for most of the company, but in our company, you know, we're still doing a tiny bit of sales, but we're not doing the same amount of sales that we did before. So we're trying to figure out, you know, what is that discussion point that we can have with these folks to basically elevate the importance of our product to a level where they will spend the money, right? So we're still one of the lucky ones. I've gotten, I have other friends in the industry, not in my industry, but other industry that have 0 sales, just because it's nothing, something that they did, but it's just, they're in the travel industry. Nobody's booking flights to fly, right? We're not allowed to go up flying. They're in the, you know, they're in the hotel industry. Nobody's booking hotel rooms. So in those cases and in those segments, do you see somehow getting those, like, what do we have to do as business salespeople to if we're in those kind of situation, what do we have to do to try to get ourselves out of it? Or is your recommendation kind of hunker down and try to get through the rough patch until the economy starts picking up again? That's really what I'm hoping to hear from this discussion. And I don't know if you had that discussion with your clients.
Is this Vi? I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. V?
Yeah, it's
Vi?
V. Yeah, it's V.
V, thank you. What business are you in? Are you in the travel business?
No, I'm in the security business. So we manufacture security cameras. We manufacture video surveillance equipment for security usage. So that's still being used. You know, there's riots in the US right now. There's some clients like the grocery industry, they're still probably repairing and fixing, but nobody's really going out and spending the 10, 20, maybe $100,000 project that they're used to. Governments have now shut down. Schools have shut down for the better part of the year. They're not even sure of what they're doing. Governments themselves are not sure where their budget's coming because they spent so much money with the benefit package. So all of these people are uncertain about how they're going to get money to spend. So because of this uncertainty, they're all kind of pulling back, and we're kind of sitting back there and saying, hey, you know, what can we do as an organization to convince you to either go out and get budget, spend the budget that you have, or make us, you know, somewhat important like PPE that you have to have, right? So we're trying to find that kind of holy grail that we can actually present to our folks. And it's got nothing to do with, you know, us being able to approach them and having a process or a pitch, right? A good pitch, a bad pitch. I think for us, it's really finding what is the value proposition that we have to approach our client for us to get up to that area where they said, yeah, I'm going to feel confident enough to take whatever money I have and spend it on your solution, right? And I can only speak on my part because I think I'm lucky. There's some, like I said, my friends that I have working right now who are really unlucky are guys like in the travel industry and other places. But I'm wondering, Charles, if you, as you're dealing with all these customers, what seems to be the commonality for these companies to try to push out this type of sale?
Yeah, good question. So when we form a sales growth team, we actually put your question on the table. And you're 100% correct in something that you said, and I agree with, meaning you're 100%, I agree with you. I don't know if you're 100% correct, who knows, but at least I agree with you. And that is that if you form a team to look at what you provide so that you can reimagine it, re-engineer it, redeploy it in an environment where it will add value, then that's the response that I would ask you. I wouldn't just keep using a sales technique that's not going to work without you doing something that might change the listening on the other side. Now, when you were talking about travel and all this other stuff, I thought you were in the travel agency business, but you're not. So I don't want to talk about something that doesn't apply to you. I'd rather talk about something that applies to you. And so when you were talking about security cameras and surveillance, you didn't see my thought bubble, but I promise you on my word of honor that what I heard was, wow, this is a great business to be in today. Because I'm not like you. I'm not playing mental chess with myself that says, well, if I do this, they're going to do this. And if I make this other move, it's checkmate and I'm dead. That's you. I'm not in your head. What I would rather you consider is throw away all that crazy thinking and start from scratch. And think about what would add value today with security and surveillance. Well, there are many offices that require cameras and tracking people who are coming and going because we're coming out of a lockdown. You may be able to provide some way to monitor premises that are not being occupied right now. I know I own a business and I'm in Midtown with an empty office sitting there. I have no idea if it's getting raided, looted. I don't know if people have smashed my windows in, but if I had cameras and if I had a way of monitoring that information, I might invest in that, because right now I have a big concern that I don't know what kind of an office I'm going back to. So I'm not saying that's the answer, but I am saying that the best way to tackle the problem is to have a collaborative discussion with some thought leaders because you're trapping yourself in your own head. We used to work with clients in the financial crash, 2008, 2007. And we used to hear this all the time. We used to hear, no one's buying, no one's buying. And we'd say, why? The economy. It's the economy. Now, what I found fascinating is ring, ring, I'd have a conversation with someone, and I promise you one thing that's not present in that conversation is the economy, not present. So what's this economy you keep talking about? The people aren't buying. What's present is a conversation. So tell me about, now the first question I would ask you, if you're going to reimagine and reinvent your company offering, meaning security cameras, is can you, in doing this exercise that we did earlier, isolate problems that people have relative to the solutions you provide? And you might say no, but if I was with you for 15 minutes, I could probably imagine that we could come up with at least 5. I gave you one. I'm a business owner. I don't have cameras. I don't know what's going on in my business. So I'm just arguing that the very first thing for you to consider is look for possibility, not for non-possibility. Because if you keep thinking, well, you know, it's never going to work, no one's ever going to buy, well, you kind of like checkmated yourself before you were able to come up with a solution. I just want to leave you with that thinking. I don't know if that made an impact. I know you're looking for a silver bullet. Here's your silver bullet. Use the problem opportunity matrix.
I think what you said did help a little bit, and maybe I can clarify what I'm hearing. It might be a little bit of a challenge to do this, but I'm hearing that, take a fresh perspective on the situation. With that being said, to me in my head, it translates to maybe talking to people that are outside my industry, maybe talking to people in the travel agency might bring some ideas into it, right? They might see a totally different view from where I'm seeing. I can also value what you're saying is we keep seeing the same problems the same way, and we can't seem to get around it. But one of the challenges that I'm going to tell you right now in my industry, and I think I can't talk for the rest of the group, but one of the challenges I have is, our day-to-day business of trying to survive and make those numbers so that we can keep the lights on and the people at work is sometimes we just don't have that capability, right? I got invited by my CEO to this group, and he has his group that with the Innovator Alliance that he can talk to. But us in sales, that's somewhat tough. How do you recommend that we go and create that type of group to be able to get that kind of new ideas? And then how do you suggest that we create that kind of platform of discussion? Is it you go out and say, reach out to your contacts and say, hey, you want to be a part of this group? There's going to be 5 or 6 of us, and this is what we're going to discuss about. How do you go about doing that?
There's many ways. There's my contact information. Shoot me an email, no charge. I'd be happy to help you out. But I'll give you a quick point. Whenever people are struggling about how do they adapt to, how do they adapt their business? How do they adapt their offering? What I would recommend you do is you take, and this we've recommended many of our clients. If you've been in business for a while, you probably have a few great clients that you've partnered with. They care about you, the people that, you've added value to. Call them. Get them together on a Zoom call and just say, today's discussion is we want to understand some of the concerns that you have. We're thinking of changing and offering some of these things. Would that be valuable? Get feedback. So I think getting feedback from your market as best you can is one way. But more importantly, just have a conversation with people. What are they concerned about? And then somewhere they may tell you 10 things. One thing you can fix. The other 9 you can't. And by the way, just as an aside, I'm a scuba diver, and I booked a vacation to go to Bonaire in July, which is a wonderful site for scuba diving. I am 100% prepared to pay another $1,000 if I found a travel agent that would book me into Bonaire on a flight that would get me there at the time I want to go. So I don't want to hear that people aren't willing to spend money on travel. It's all a matter of perspective. I need the break. I need to regenerate my batteries. I want to go on vacation. So people are going to, I think you'll see the travel agency, once this lockdown goes away, is going to explode. And the people that will buy are the ones that they felt they developed good relationships with people when they didn't need their business. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Lots of conversations. That's what you want to do, and I'm willing to continue offline if you want to have that discussion with your CEO.
Okay. Have we got any additional comments, questions?
Hi there, I'm Jeff with Dave here at ABL Employment. I just had a general question for you, Charles, but also put it out to the group if anyone has any feedback. So obviously for the last 3 months, we've kind of taken, I wouldn't say we've definitely slowed down in terms of our outbound sales efforts, but we're moving into a period of time now where we're opening things back up and putting a consistent output effort there. But we are anticipating that the majority of our efforts are going to be virtual. We haven't really had anyone, we haven't really made an appointment or set an appointment where there was an opportunity to accept or decline. Has anyone encountered this in the recent weeks or any recent experience? How are buyers right now responding to virtual buying and virtual negotiations?
What's your business, Jeff?
We are a temporary staffing agency.
And the question is, how are people buying virtually? Is that the question?
How are people being receptive to the virtual meeting, the virtual negotiations? Like in the past, all of our meetings have been in person, live right on site, right at the work site. So this is definitely new territory for us of trying to negotiate this online, right? Or doing this negotiation online.
Yeah. I can only speak to my experience, and I can tell you for my business and for many of our clients' business, we're actually very surprised at how receptive people are to virtual. Now, having said that, I think Zooms are more effective than phone calls, but so a lot of people are working from home. A lot of people are in lockdown, including buyers. And so I'm finding they're much more easy to get a hold of. There's some sort of self-isolation where people want to deal with each other, so that they're taking phone calls more and they're taking Zoom calls more. The other thing I'm noticing, which is dodging your question a little bit, but it's related, is I'm finding a lot of companies are partnering more for the very reason that it's hard to just get to one buyer with one service. But if you join forces with another company who can bring you into their clients, that's another alternative. But you happen to be, again, I used to run a staffing agency, so I am very familiar with your world. I believe, and again, I'm not bogged down with all the reasons why not. I keep thinking of reasons why, not reasons why not. And so staffing is very, very hot right now. Now, what kind of staffing are you doing? Is it IT? Is it a particular segment? Or is it, tell me about the kind of people you provide staff for.
We actually have two separate companies. So we have one division that's running the general labor warehouse industrial market. And on the flip side, we are also handling administrative as well.
Yeah, great.
Under two separate companies.
So, got it. So again, you got to come from a place of abundance, not scarcity. If you keep thinking there's nothing out there, no one's buying, your actions will correlate to the context you operate in. But if your context is, there's a world of opportunity out there. Now I'm going to give you that because I believe it. There are people who, how many unemployed people in the United States? Probably a lot in Canada too. A lot of unemployed people. there's a lot of companies that got the PPP, they need to hire people. So I think you're very much in demand. Now, I'll tell you what I think some of the problems are that are general in all circumstances, but particularly now. And one common problem, no matter what type of staffing you're providing, is it full-time or temporary or both?
Both.
Both, okay. So let's go with full-time for now. Biggest problem in staffing is candidates get hired and they don't stick. Number one problem. And how do staffing agencies address that number one problem? Oh, we'll give you a 90-day guarantee. Can I tell you, as a business owner, that means nothing. I'll tell you why. Because to hire a candidate took me 3 months, umpteen hours of resources in my organization to interview, vet that person. It took 30 to 45 days to onboard that person and train that person. And then it took me 2-3 months to discover that person didn't work out or they quit. Your guarantee, zip. I could care less about your guarantee. Why? Because, oh, we'll find you another person and we won't charge you a recruiting fee. That's another 3 months. That's another 50 hours of labor. That's another bunch of training. So here's what I want to hear from you as a staffing agency that's going to separate you from the rest of the staffing universe. And it hits me like a 2x4 that staffing companies don't do this. The number one problem is candidates sticking, not finding the right candidate, not vetting the right candidate. Number one problem, they don't stick. You tell me that as a business owner, and I'm like, you hit my problem. What is your solution? Well, what's the name of your company, Jeff?
ABL Employment.
AB Unemployment? So we have the AB Employment candidate stick process. You want to hear about that? What is that? We vet the person, we meet with them, we phone them weekly. People will tell us where they're not satisfied in working in your environment before they'll tell you, because you might fire them. We promise a weekly, in the first 30 to 45 days, report status on the satisfaction level. We have a survey, it's anonymous. We ask them to fill it out. I'm giving you ideas. I mean, I don't know, we could brainstorm this in about 20 minutes. So don't be telling me, oh, no one's buying. That's BS. No one's buying because they're afraid that you're going to supply them with shit candidates. So what I want you to be telling them is, we have a process for this problem. We have a solution for this other problem. So number one, I'm giving you this as a gift. I hope this isn't.
I think
Charles, we
lost
lost your
audio as
audio.
well. We lost the sound.
You're on mute.
Still muted.
On mute.
There you
You're back on mute.
go.
Yeah, I'm not able to unmute them either.
How's that?
There.
There we
There
go.
you are.
I got 10 minutes. All right. So I was beating you up, and I didn't mean to sound like I was beating you up. So number one, stick process. Number two problem, always the people you provide candidates to don't know how to interview. Hey, we vetted all these people. We've got the right candidate. And what does the client do? The client destroys that process because they don't know how to interview.
Mhm.
So What I want you to consider is, what's the name of your company again? Sorry, forgive me.
ABL.
EBL.
A.
So A.
ABL, yeah.
So we have the ABL interview process. Want to hear about it? Yeah. What's the ABL interview process? We train you how to interview our candidates. We have best practices. What are they? We have an interview scorecard. So we know what questions you need to ask and then score them so that when 3 people interview the same candidate, in the absence of a scorecard, here's what happens. What do you think of the candidate? Oh, I liked him, kind of nice. Didn't like, he wasn't shaved, like had a kind of tatty suit. What did you think? I love the candidate. He was great. Really? And what did you think? I didn't like, he didn't make eye contact, not so great. So the problem with that is you got 3 people with 3 different opinions who cannot align on why they like the person or not like the person. So what we say is an interview scorecard with specific questions and a score. And this is what you say. What did you, 3 people, what did you score the candidate? I scored them a 20. Okay. What did you score the candidate? I scored them a 30. What did you score the candidate? 45. Wow. There's a lot of disparities. Let's go through. Well, when I asked this question, this is the response I got. Well, that's funny. I asked a similar question and this is the response I got. Okay. So can you see that we're taking a qualitative and making it a quantitative experience? The second part is most candidates fail interviews because they're talented, they're experienced, but they have no chemistry. So you need to do a chemistry test. And how you do a chemistry test is you ask the candidate to go up on a whiteboard and answer 4 questions. What are your core values? What don't you like to do but will do anyway? What's a personal or professional win for you? And anything else you'd like to tell me? And you ask them to write it down, and you bring all those 3 people together into that meeting, and they watch the body language, the interaction. That will tell you more in an interview than you having that candidate go through a whole series of different meetings with different people, and you get into this kind of, well, they seemed qualified, but something was missing, the chemistry was off. So again, we have the EBL interview process, and you now provide that. And that's the same for everybody else. I think you need to start figuring out what are the problems and what are the solutions. And the moment you find a problem, you want to ask people what they're willing to invest in. How important is it for them to get rid of that problem? Does that help?
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Any last questions to get in here? Just a bit of a reminder, Charles has left his contact information on the slide. I believe Laura will also be providing that information to all of you. We'll also be uploading the video and the presentation to our portal, so you'll have access there. With that, I'd really like to thank Charles for his time today and presenting to all of us. I know I have realized that I have a lot to learn and a lot to go back and get to work on. So thank you, Charles, and I'll hope to connect with you again soon.
Thank you, Amir. I hope this helped. Be safe, be well, and be prosperous.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.